Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel. And what you're about to hear wasn't supposed to happen. The candles on the cake were still lit when I stood up. I didn't blow them out. I didn't make a wish. I didn't even touch the slice she placed in front of me with that rehearsed smile. Instead, I watched her lean across the table toward him. Not me, laughing too loud, touching his wrist like it was the most natural thing in the world. The silverware clinked, someone popped champagne, and in the middle of all that noise, I disappeared. Not physically, but I swear, at that table, no one saw me anymore. It was my birthday, but the spotlight, that belonged to him, and her smile. It hadn't belonged to me in a long time. I could give you names. I could tell you who was sitting where, what she wore, how he smelled like sandalwood and arrogance. But those details don't matter anymore, because this isn't a story about the dinner. This is a story about what happened after I stood up, quietly slid my chair back, and walked out. Not a word, not a scene, just silence. And that silence, it followed me home. It climbed into the car with me. It sat beside me in our living room. It slept in our bed while she stayed out. She didn't text, she didn't call, not for hours. And when she finally came home, barefoot and buzzing with energy, mascara smudged just enough to suggest it had been a night, she asked, "Why'd you leave early?" Early, like leaving during dessert was some criminal offense. I said, "You didn't notice?" She blinked at me like I'd spoken another language, and then she said something I will never forget. "You always get weird when I talk to other people. Not men, not him, just people. Like I was the irrational one. Like I imagined the way she clung to his every word while I sat there trying to count how many times she'd looked at me since the appetizers. 2, by the way, once when I spilled water on myself, and once when I asked if she was having fun. I should have confronted her, demanded answers, but instead, I apologized. I apologized for walking out of my own birthday dinner because my wife was emotionally wrapped around someone else. And that's when I knew. Something had shifted, not just in our marriage, but in me. Because the next day, I made a plan. And that plan would turn my quiet little exit into something no one, not even her, saw coming. The next morning, the bed beside me was cold. Not just empty. Cold. Like no one had slept in it. Her side of the covers was still perfectly tucked, the pillow untouched. I stared at it longer than I should have. I didn't text her. I didn't call. I just sat there in silence, wondering if I had finally become invisible, or if she had just stopped pretending I mattered. My phone buzzed once, a calendar reminder for couples brunch with her parents. I laughed. It sounded like a cough. There was no apology text, no explanation. No, "I'm sorry for making your birthday feel like background noise." Instead, 2 hours later, the front door opened and she walked in wearing the same dress from the night before, holding a paper cup of coffee like everything was fine. No shame, no hesitation. She tossed her purse on the table, looked at me sitting on the couch, and asked, "You didn't go to work?" I stared at her. That was her opening line. Not, "Are you okay?" or "Can we talk?" Just a bland observation about my schedule. I said nothing. I just blinked. That silence must have irritated her because she sighed dramatically, plopped down across from me, and said, "Look, I don't know what's going on with you lately, but you've been acting distant." I almost choked on that. Me acting distant, I reminded her, calmly I swear, that she spent the entire night giggling at another man's stories while I sat across from them like a waiter waiting to be acknowledged. She scoffed and said, "So what? I can't enjoy myself. It's not a crime to talk to someone who actually has a personality." That line hit like a slap. A personality. As if I didn't have one. As if my quiet nature, my boring love for routine and crossword puzzles and fixing the sink on weekends made me fundamentally less interesting. As if this man, this Joran, this temporary distraction, was somehow more alive than the man who'd stood by her side for 12 years. I stood up then. Not to argue, not to yell. I just couldn't sit there anymore. I needed air. I needed to breathe somewhere she hadn't poisoned. But as I reached the door, she added one more thing, almost casually. "You know, if you keep acting like this, don't be surprised if I do find someone who actually makes me feel something." Again, I paused. Not because I was shocked. I wasn't. Not really. I think a part of me had been waiting for that line for years. But it still hurt. And here's where the shift happened. Instead of begging, instead of defending myself like I always had, I just turned and said, "Okay." She blinked. "Okay, what?" "Okay. Go ahead." And then I walked out again. Not just from the house this time, but from everything. My plan wasn't finished, not yet. But that morning, that was the first brick in the wall I was building. And she didn't even see it coming. I didn't go far that morning. I drove to a gas station and just sat in the parking lot, staring at the windshield as rain started to drizzle. It wasn't dramatic rain, not movie scene thunder or crashing storms, just quiet, steady drops that matched the hollow ache in my chest. I didn't even know where I was heading. I just needed to not be there. I didn't want to hear her voice anymore, didn't want to smell her perfume on the pillows or see her half-used mug in the sink. I texted my boss and said I was taking a personal day. He didn't even ask why. I guess I wasn't the kind of guy people asked about, not even my wife. Eventually, I found myself parked outside of an old strip mall. There was this sad little cafe I used to go to before we got married, before everything became we instead of me. I walked in, sat by the window, and ordered the same thing I used to back then, burnt coffee and a cold sandwich. And while I was sitting there chewing through the rubbery bread, something strange happened. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, no name, just a text that said, "Did he leave again?" I stared at it for a full minute before typing. "Who is this?" No reply. At first I figured it was spam, but the phrasing, "again," that stuck with me. It wasn't random. It sounded like someone who knew more than they should. I didn't tell Marlene about it. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing I was rattled. When I got home later that evening, she was gone again. No note, no call, just a jacket missing from the hook and her favorite heels gone from the rack. I checked her location sharing, something we'd set up years ago and never bothered to remove, and saw her parked outside a building I didn't recognize. It wasn't a restaurant. It wasn't a friend's house. It was an apartment complex on the far edge of town, across from a closed-down theater. I didn't drive there, not yet. I didn't want to be the crazy husband sitting in a parking lot spying on his own wife. But I bookmarked the location, just in case. And I kept staring at it, thinking about the message. Did he leave again? That word, again, kept circling in my brain. Was this not the first time she'd done this? Had she been having someone else over when I left for conferences or stayed late at the office? For the first time in years, I realized something terrifying. Maybe I never knew my wife at all. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her laughing at that table again, head tilted toward him, eyes sparkling with the kind of light she hadn't shown me in years. My mind wouldn't stop replaying that anonymous text either. Did he leave again? It echoed in my thoughts like a question that already knew the answer. At around 2:40 a.m., I finally got out of bed, walked to the kitchen, and opened the junk drawer, the one where we kept old batteries, broken pens, and receipts from places we never wanted to return. I pulled out the spare key I never gave her. She always teased me for being too cautious, too paranoid. But that night, it didn't feel paranoid. It felt necessary. The next morning, I waited until she left. She said she was going to a client breakfast. No kiss, no eye contact, just mascara, a blazer, and her phone already pressed to her ear. 5 minutes after the door shut, I got into my car and followed the location ping I'd saved. I drove slowly. Every turn made my stomach tighten. I didn't even know what I was expecting to find. Maybe nothing. Maybe something I couldn't come back from. But when I parked across from that apartment complex, I knew. I just knew. Her car was already there. I watched from the other side of the street, trying not to shake. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Then I saw her, through a window on the second floor. She wasn't alone. I couldn't make out his face, but I didn't need to. I recognized her body language. The way she leaned in, the way she laughed like it came from some deep, hidden part of her that I hadn't been allowed access to in years. It was worse than seeing something physical. It was emotional, intimate, private, and it broke something in me that hadn't cracked until now. I didn't storm up there. I didn't knock. I just sat in the car and watched, because I needed the truth to slap me in the face before I could stop making excuses for her. She stayed for over an hour. And when she finally left, she looked lighter. Like she'd just had the best morning of her week. She drove off without even glancing in my direction. I waited another 15 minutes, heart pounding, then crossed the street. I didn't go into his apartment. I just left something in his mailbox, a single photograph. From my birthday dinner, her hand on his arm, my face in the background, completely blurred out. I wrote one sentence on the back. She does this when she's bored. Then I walked away. Not because I had a plan yet, but because the silence had ended and the unraveling had just begun. By the time I got home, the weight of what I had just done started to sink in. I had never been that kind of man, the one who left cryptic messages, played mind games, acted like a ghost in someone else's life. And yet here I was leaving anonymous warnings to a stranger I didn't even know. Because I had finally accepted that I no longer recognized the woman I married. For hours, I sat in the living room with the TV on mute, watching light flicker across the screen while my mind ran wild. Every moment in our marriage suddenly felt suspicious. Every girl's night, every late work event, every day she said her phone had died. They all rushed back like puzzle pieces I'd never put together until now. She came home later than usual. Her lipstick was gone, but I could still smell cologne on her clothes. And it wasn't mine. She acted like nothing happened, tossing her bag on the couch and asking if I wanted Thai or Mexican for dinner. That's when I realized something truly sickening. She wasn't trying to hide it anymore. She wasn't even pretending. And maybe that was the worst betrayal of all. Not just the affair itself, but the way she decided I wasn't even worth the lie. So I told her I'd order in. She nodded, disappeared into the shower, and I sat at the kitchen table, pretending to scroll through food apps. Instead, I was scrolling through our joint bank account. She never cared to check it. Finance bored her. But as I scanned through recent transactions, my breath caught. 2 unfamiliar charges stood out. One for a hotel bar, and another for a flower delivery, under a name I didn't recognize. To M.R., it said. The initials didn't match anyone in her family. But I remembered she once called him Miles during a phone call when she thought I wasn't listening. That moment had passed quickly then, but now it rang like a fire alarm. I copied the address linked to the delivery. Same area as the apartment building. Same damn block. I should have felt angry, but all I felt was hollow. Like someone had scooped out the insides and left the shell standing. And as she walked back into the room, towel around her shoulders, smiling like we still had a future, I realized the most chilling part of all this. She believed I would never leave. She believed I was too spineless, too dependent, too dull to ever disrupt her perfect little secret life. She was wrong. What I did next wasn't rage. It wasn't revenge. It was quiet. Controlled. Precise. I messaged someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 6 years. My cousin Dalton, the one who owed me a favor. He was in property management, and he always said, "If you ever need to disappear without making a sound, I can make that happen." That night, I wrote him just 2 words. It's time. Dalton didn't ask questions. He never did. Maybe that's why I trusted him more than most people in my life. Within 3 hours of my message, he replied with an address, a key code, and 1 sentence. It's quiet, no lease, no paper trail. I stared at that message for a long time. I wasn't sure if I was ready. Leaving wasn't just packing bags. It was unraveling 12 years of identity, of furniture we built together, of photos on the fridge and shared Amazon accounts and matching Christmas pajamas we hadn't worn in 2 years. But the moment I saw her scrolling through her phone that evening, laughing at something she didn't share with me, I knew I'd waited long enough. That night, I didn't sleep. I waited until she passed out, wine glass on the nightstand, face lit by the glow of her screen, until her fingers finally went still. I moved slowly, careful not to wake her. I grabbed the essentials: clothes, passport, my laptop, the external drive with all my personal documents. I left the wedding album. I left our anniversary gifts. I left the pair of mugs that said his and hers, even though hers had been collecting dust at the back of the cabinet for months. I wasn't bitter. I was deliberate. But before I left, I made one final move. I took the framed photo of us from the hallway, the one she loved to show guests, and I replaced it with something else. I had printed it that morning. A screenshot from her shared location history. It showed her parked at that same apartment 3 nights in a row, each time during hours she claimed to be working late. On the bottom, I wrote, "He knows." I hung it in the exact same spot and walked out without closing the door behind me. The apartment Dalton gave me was nothing special. Old floors, peeling walls, a creaky radiator that sounded like it coughed every time it turned on. But it was mine, and it was silent. For the first time in years, I could actually hear my own thoughts. And that's when something strange happened. My phone started buzzing. Not from Marlene, but from that same unknown number. 3 messages, no name, just, "She's nervous. He's starting to ask questions. Get ready." I didn't know who was sending them, or why they cared, but I did know one thing. Whatever I had walked away from wasn't finished with me yet. The texts kept coming, always from the same unknown number, never revealing an identity, never asking for anything, just dropping fragments like breadcrumbs in a forest I didn't realize I was lost in. "She doesn't know you're watching. He's not the only one. She lied before. You just didn't catch it." I couldn't decide if it was paranoia, manipulation, or some twisted version of help. Either way, I didn't respond. I just saved every message. Meanwhile, Marlene still hadn't called, not once. I kept checking my phone like an idiot, half hoping for a frantic message, an apology, even a pathetic excuse. But nothing came. It was like she had erased me the moment I stepped out. Like I was never part of her story at all. The next morning, I sat at the edge of the unfamiliar mattress, scrolling through her social media. That's when I noticed something that made my hands go cold. A photo, posted by one of her colleagues, showed a group of them out for drinks. Not unusual. But there, in the background, was the man from my birthday dinner. Miles. He had his arm around another woman, not Marlene. The way they stood together, the way she leaned into him. It wasn't casual, it wasn't new either. Suddenly it all clicked. Marlene wasn't his affair. She was the other woman. She hadn't been cheating on me with a man who wanted her. She had been the side dish in someone else's meal. And the way she had clung to his attention that night, how desperate she had seemed to soak it all in. It wasn't love, it was delusion. I wanted to feel vindicated, but what I felt instead was deeper than betrayal. It was pity. Not just for me, but for her. Because whatever fantasy she had spun for herself, whatever lies she had built her private world on, they were already crumbling. I wasn't the only one who had walked away from her. I had just been the last one to do it. Then came the final message. This time, it wasn't anonymous. The name that flashed on my screen was Marlene. Her message was short, just 6 words. "We need to talk. Now." Please, I didn't respond. Not yet. Because for once, she wasn't the one holding the silence over my head. I was. And she had no idea what I was about to do with it. I didn't respond to Marlene's message for 2 days. Not because I wanted to punish her. That wasn't who I was, even after everything. But because I needed space to decide if her voice still held any power over me. When I finally called, her voice cracked the moment she answered. She sounded fragile, not like herself. Or maybe exactly like herself without the mask. She begged to meet, said it wasn't what I thought, claimed she'd made mistakes but it wasn't real, that she had lost track of what mattered. I met her in a public park, neutral ground. She came dressed down, no makeup, hair pulled back. The confident, sharp-tongued woman I had known looked like she had been hollowed out by regret. She cried within minutes, told me Miles had cut her off, that he never saw her as anything more than a distraction, that when she came home that night and saw the photo I left in the hallway, the location screenshot, she knew it was over. Not just with him, but with the story she had been telling herself. She asked if we could fix it, if there was any version of us left worth salvaging. I told her no, but I also told her something else, that I forgave her. Not because she deserved it, but because I did. Because I was tired of carrying her weight on my back. Because I didn't want the next version of my life to be built on bitterness. She looked surprised, then nodded slowly, as if realizing for the first time that I had truly, finally let go. A few weeks later, I signed a lease on my own place, a quiet 1-bedroom overlooking a lake I used to fish at as a kid. I started taking early walks, reading again, learning how to cook for one, and actually enjoying it. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone to see me. I saw myself. And then something happened I never expected. I reconnected with someone from college, Lauren. She'd always been kind, thoughtful, warm, in the way Marlene never was. We started slow, coffee, long walks, no pressure. It's still early, but it feels different, real. So No, my story didn't end with revenge or chaos. It ended with peace, with freedom, with rediscovering the parts of myself I forgot were worth loving. Thank you for listening to my story. This has been Reddit Confessions. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories just like it. Tell us in the comments, what historical event do you wish you could have witnessed in person, and why?